Monday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.
Now, so much going on in the world of rugby. We've had Heineken Champions Cup round of 16 just gone, to be promptly followed by quarterfinals this weekend, coming, including the Aviva Stadium, on Good Friday evening. Sharks 50, Munster 35 in Durban, and Leinster beat Ulster in Dublin, 30 points to 15. Allied to that, there is Women's Six Nations very much ongoing. Ireland were hammered by France. It was a 50-point deficit at Musgrave Park. Ireland are away to Italy in round 3. There is a rest week and some respite upcoming, and then Italy in round 3. Very happy to say Gerry Thornley of the Irish Times here in studio. Hey, Gerry.
How you doing, Joe?
And Fiona Hayes, Grand Slam winner, with us as well. Good evening.
Hey, Joe. How, Gerry? How are you?
Hi, Fiona.
Fiona, I've made you talk enough about the Women's Six Nations.
Thank God.
We will come back to it, though, in just a few moments. But let's start with the Heineken Champions Cup. So, Gerry, we had Durban and Dublin, contrasting weather conditions. The swimming pool for the kids in Durban, I think the highlight of the weekend for everyone.
Yeah, and suggesting that they should do the same in Thomond Park and places. Yeah. Yeah, very contrasting games, very contrasting conditions. I think it showed that the Sharks are very dangerous animals in their own turf in hot weather and high humidity. And it showed that Leinster are very much an all-court, all-weather team in the way they won.
Well, let's stick with Durban then. We'll go chronologically. I mean, it did have the experience, Fiona, of really, focusing attention on the game as it neared. And you start going, ooh, Mapimpi, ooh, Am, ooh, Cock, ooh, Etzebeth, ooh, Khaleesi. And then allied to home advantage and the weather conditions and any other numerous things you care to mention. And it suddenly looked like a very difficult task. Munster had a great start, if people didn't see the game. Shane Daly scored a try. They manoeuvred around the blitz defence, and it was a brilliant start. I would say they probably felt very pleased to be within 3 points of the Sharks by half-time. And then the Sharks scored 4 tries in 18 minutes, 2 maul tries early in the second half, running rugby as well. And I would say the 50-35 scoreline in the end probably flattered Munster.
Yeah, definitely. I suppose it was that period of those tries, and I think it was 5 tries as well in 25 minutes, Joe. They absolutely blitzed them physically in the second half. Even when I watch back the game, looking at Munster coming out, they just look tired. They look drained. You can blame the conditions, but they look like guys that had played, just had finished the 80 minutes. I thought after the second half they were blown off the park. Sharks maul really came tight. I think they gained 19 metres throughout the game with that maul. Munster were just giving over penalties at maul time, turnovers. Munster had 19 turnovers in the whole game. It was almost like it started so well, but it just, the physicality, and I know there's a lot of talk about it, in the media, and you're looking at Crowley, and I was trying to see what type of game Crowley had, but it's very hard to judge that when you can't get gain line, and Munster just couldn't get it against these Sharks, especially in the pack. They did out wide sometimes, but definitely not go forward ball in the pack. I think between Coombs and O'Mahony, I think they carried for 4 metres all game. And
Gerry, the breakdown, another area.
Whoa, carnage. It's at times it was almost like they got there too soon and then just weren't prepared for the counter ruck. Like the Sharks had huge joy out of counter rucking, and Wayne Barnes allowed very much a free and open contest to the breakdown, and it suited the Sharks, and their accuracy, their urgency around the breakdown was surprising, as well as their lack of physicality, because I'm sure they would be very disappointed by that they were blitzed in the breakdown. It was a huge area of concern for them. I think that I gave them very little hope, simply because you do not want to be going to South Africa with a questionable scrum and a questionable front row. You just don't. And I felt that Munster would have to pay for losing John Ryan. I mean, to lose him once was unfortunate, but to lose him twice looks like carelessness. And you look at James Cronin playing for Leicester as well. They're unlucky that Ty Byrne wasn't there, but I always had big issues about Munster's chances in that game because of their scrum. I didn't see the breakdown getting obliterated, and I didn't see their defence being so porous. It's quite extraordinary that up until half-time against the Scarlets, the second best defence of the URC, and in the pool stage of the Heineken Champions Cup, they conceded the least number of tries, along with Leinster, only 5. And the last 2.5 games, in 200 minutes of rugby, they've conceded 17 tries and 123 points. It's just been like why this is happening. I'm struggling to put my finger on it. I mean, it was alarming to see Mapimpi step through the 2 locks for that first ride. Oh, if it's going to be like that, this is going to be very, very long afternoon. Then it started to get ugly in the second half. They're still scoring some good tries. Some of their running rugby, some of their variations off line out. I actually thought Jack Crowley did very well. Calvin Nash continues to play brilliantly in losing causes, which is a sign of a really good player. He's really progressed this season, but they were just completely outpowered up front, and no doubt the conditions had a part to play like that. It's just very un-Munster-like to see them bullied like that physically in Europe, in the Champions Cup.
Yes. Breakdown, Gerry said, Fiona, we didn't quite see coming. I think Irish sides in the post-Joe Schmidt era pride themselves almost on a certain level of IQ at the breakdown. So I'd love your thoughts on what happened there. And also the scrum issue we did see coming. This has been an area of concern for Munster for far too long now, really.
Yeah, and it's just struggling to even lock down the scrum, which is unusual. You know, you've Kilcoyne in there, who you'd expect a little bit more from. I mean, he's up at Irish camp. It's just that tight head side, it seems to be. And you're bang on the money about John Ryan. It was only when he came back to Munster, I think everyone realised his absolute worth and exactly what he can do when we're watching him over with the Chiefs. And the same as Cronin. I'm looking at him with Leicester, and he's starting week in, week out with Dane Coles. And they're causing damage as well. So it's such a shame that these guys have gone. You understand that they want to blend in, and Salanoa, and you've Wycherley coming through as well, but they don't seem to be up for those absolutely massive physical packs, and they're getting blitzed at scrum time. And Joe, I think the breakdown was absolutely shocking. Like Gerry said, it was almost like the game plan is to obviously move the ball quickly. So when you're working on the breakdown, you send one guy, 2 guys in, maybe they're sealing, and the ball was supposed to go, but they were under such pressure. It was almost like their decision making around that area, whether to counter ruck or go past the ball, it went out the window, and they were focusing on quick rugby. When they couldn't get those quick rucks, I thought the Sharks' judgment in absolutely blitzing those rucks were brilliant, and Munster seemed shell-shocked in that area.
So Gerry, you would have to say, if we focus in the scrum for a moment, I'm sure Graham Rowntree, well, I don't know what he says publicly actually about the loss of the players we mentioned there, but certainly privately, banging, I'm sure, his head against a wall. That one is not on the shoulders of a new coaching ticket.
No,
that is on the Munster hierarchy. They have to arm the team with a scrum and a front row in particular who can take them where they want to go. And that, again, this isn't, this is the first season this has been an issue for Munster.
No, it's not. They let John Ryan go once, like I said, and then he came back only because Wasps went out of existence, and he studied the scrum. And I have it in pretty good authority that he was not given a very satisfactory offer to stay.
Yes.
And his agent then went and put out feeders, and to get outbid by a Super Rugby team is very unusual. And if they'd made a proper offer, given his young family, I'm sure he would have stayed. So that's on them, as is letting James Cronin go. They've been unlucky with signings, no doubt about it, in the RG Snyman and Malachy Fekito. They've spent big money in those signings, but their whole signings and re-signings, they've left a lot of gaps there. When you compare and contrast with Ulster, Marty Moore gets injured. They bring in Jeff Tamaga-Allen, once capped All Black, was now redeclared for Samoa. They get Rory Sutherland in a short-term contract. They're bringing in Stephen Kitchoff next season. Their policies with regard to the front row are just light years ahead of Munster at the moment.
It's like, let's not mess around with it. It's too important.
Exactly. It's a complete contrast in the 2K studies, and it's almost impossible if you're going down to South Africa in a knockout match if your scrum's in big trouble.
Yes, and am I right with Ryan that it was on the Babas where fellow teammates looked at him and said, "Hang on, you're bloody good.
Yeah.
If you're not being valued at home, we'll take you."
Yes, exactly. Probably the best tight head on their books for the last decade. And he was let go not once but twice.
Are tight heads not supposed to earn the big bucks? I mean, why would...
Well, yeah, exactly. And it's a much more difficult position to scrummage than it is loose head. I was reading Andrew Porter saying this recently, and Peter Clowes extended his career by going over from tight head to loose head. It's just you're not getting the weight of maybe 2, 3 or more players coming at you at scrum time. It's just a much easier position to scrummage in loose head than it is tight head. Tight heads are worth their weight in gold, and Munster appear not to have appreciated their one man. And I always thought, like I said earlier, that this would come back to bite them.
Yes. On the defensive point, Fiona, Gerry mentioned 40 points conceded against Scarlets. I think when at Thomond, Glasgow were 31-0 up, it struck everybody as concerning, but I suppose people thought, well, okay, let's not panic. And now, on the evidence of Saturday, there's some issue with the defence. What was going wrong for them?
Yeah, obviously, like, we know how quick. I thought Kerwin Bosch was brilliant, and he just ran the show from 10. I thought he was really good to watch. And when the Sharks go wide, you can attack. But what's been happening in the Scarlets, and especially in this game as well, that I saw, is the individual missed tackles. Right. You look at Leinster at the weekend, in the whole game, they'd one missed tackle. I think it was Ryan Baird. Munster individuals, for some reason, in the last couple of games, they've been conceding yards right down the middle. And if you're not chopping low, and especially in modern day rugby, there's always guys looking to offload. It's such a quick game. They're getting their hands free. And I think Munster in particular have been very slow. So when there's been line breaks, or when guys have burst through that contact, I think Munster, to get back and defend, have been very slow, and I think they're leaking tries in that area in setting up their defensive system off these line breaks. And
to what extent do we put forward the heat as a mitigating circumstance?
I think you'd have to say it was a big factor. They looked bunched, as Andy Good highlighted on BT after the game. Even coming out to start the second half, they looked absolutely bunched, and it clearly got to them, the heat and the humidity. Up around 80% or something. That's, I mean, it just wasn't high veld as well. Jeepers, would have been carnage.
So you got to be fair on that front.
Yeah, I think so. I think like they ran up big scores against both Harlequins and Bordeaux Begla in the pool stages at home as well. I'd say they'd run up big scores in Durban against most teams that go there.
Okay. Munster now have a fight in their hands to retain Champions Cup status next year. Give us the general lay of the land.
Well, basically, they go into the last two rounds. They'll be grateful for the week's respite after that. I think somebody in commentary was suggesting they stay in South Africa for a month. I think that's the last thing they need. They'll come home for a week and reset and go back out. And they play the Stormers away, who are in second place, and with Ulster breathing down the neck. So Stormers will look at that as a must win, because that would give them a home quarter and a home semi. And then they've got the Sharks away again. And never mind all the scars from last weekend, the Sharks currently sit 8th. And they could be given that they've got a Bennett on at home between now and then, they could well be breathing down Munster's necks. As might Connacht, if they beat Cardiff, which is a huge game, before they face Glasgow, which would be tricky. And the Bulls finish off with home games against Zebra and a Leinster side that might well be some way short of full strength. So basically what I'm saying is they're on 48 points, Munster, Connacht 44, Bulls 43, Sharks 41. If they don't pick up something in those two matches, it's conceivable that they will finish 8th. And that's a double whammy, because 8th won't get you into next season's Champions Cup, because it's not a merit-based qualification procedure, and the leading Welsh side will get that 8th spot. So 8th won't get you to. It'll get you into the playoffs, but of course it'll get them in a away quarter-final against the number 1 seeds, who are Leinster, which seems almost borderline cruel, doesn't it?
We know how that
came
goes.
To that.
Yeah.
So yeah, they've a lot to play for now in these last two games, and it's just curious that they've hit their worst spell of form since the teething problems at the start of the season. Because remember, until they went into this Glasgow game, they'd won 10 out of 13, and the 3 defeats were 1-score defeats against Toulouse twice and Leinster by a point. So it was just hard to see this coming.
Is it a reality check though, Fiona? Were we like how much were you reading into their upturn?
Look, I don't think it's a reality check. I think they haven't played well, in particular in the pack in the last 2 games. Let's be honest. We've talked about, like the Gerry said as well, they're scoring some really good tries. Obviously, they're not going to say they've neglected certain areas of the game to focus on. Their attack from set piece has been quite good. They've fixed some of the things in, I was going to say in Molloy defence at times, but then we saw at the weekend they struggled under that. So look, I think they just need to maybe take a step back and go back to, focusing on these 2 South African teams. We know what they can bring. The Sharks in particular, they know now, they hopefully you'd be looking at that, they'd be resting a few. They're big names, you don't know, probably not, but who knows how they get on against Toulouse. But I think that they need to go back to basics around that area. The attack, there was a lot of pressure for people to see how it's been come on and how it's moved on, and we've seen that. But now they've got to get, especially that back row kick in. I thought Hodnett was excellent again from a Munster perspective. I thought he got around the place, but we need to be getting more yards in the carries. And as Gerry said, they're South African born, but on the day, and they're both exceptional players, on the day, the 2 players didn't get us any go forward ball. So they physically need to be more dominant, I think, around that area. And you're going to have to go into these 2 games, and I suppose you're looking at a very short-term fix of that scrum. Is to get the ball in, get the ball out on your own scrum. You don't want to be doing that because that takes away from the attack from set piece. But they need to be winning their own scrum, and they need to be stop giving away the scrum penalties against these 2 South African teams. So that area is going to be huge as well, and has to be a short-term fix.
Hindsight is 20/20 vision, and you could say the second row selection, it was a tough first start for RG Snyman and so long to bring him back for that game particularly. Was he ready for it? Finian Wycherley did quite well when he came on. Now admittedly they'd lost Tyke Byrne, which was very unfortunate. The other one I'd questioned, and I'd questioned it on Friday when I saw the teams, was, I mean, you need as much physicality as you can against a South African side laden with Springboks, and I thought that was much more a game for Conor Murray than it was for Craig Casey. I felt sorry for Craig Casey and what he was having to deal with. He wasn't just having to excavate for ball, he was dealing with a few human tornadoes coming at him as well. But I just think maybe their plan was to try and build up a lead in the first half and then have Conor Murray to come on to try and close out the game. But it's certainly, in hindsight, you could question those 2 selections, but elsewhere you couldn't. Like, that's pretty much the hand. Graham Rowntree and Dennis Leamy and Mike Prendergast have been dealt. The front row, nobody had you couldn't any qualms with that. Back row, not really. Jack Crowley, I think, justified his selection. He looks very composed. He's got footwork. He's got a very good passing game. He kicked well. They're the first choice midfielders pretty much, and certainly Shane Daly and Calvin Nash particularly deserve their spots, and Mike Haley's been their go-to fullback, so you couldn't say that there were bundles of options here.
Yeah, it's all very chastening.
Also, the thing about the Sharks in the last game is that they might go into that just behind Munster, knowing they need a win themselves to qualify for both the playoffs and the Heineken Champions Cup next season in Sia Khaleesi's last potential URC game at home. So I wouldn't think they will be taking it too lightly.
In the world of football, we could put an exact figure on what losing Champions League football would entail.
Yeah.
If Munster were to go into next season without the Champions Cup, because their financial situation,
they're losing money.
They're not dripping with cash. They're losing money.
They're losing money. They're losing money, and everybody knows it. Everybody knows that they're losing money, and you'd have to even question now what the bi-location is. Seems to have alienated a bit of Cork support. Maybe there should be more European games moved to Páirc Uí Chaoimh. We all know how brilliantly the Limerick hurling team is doing, and it's attracting a new, younger fan base on the rugby team. It's worrying times, and I know there's a theory out there that Munster might be better off going into the Challenge Cup to end what now looks like going to be 12 trophyless years.
Yeah.
But the whole stigma being attached to being in the Challenge Cup as opposed to the Champions Cup for the first time ever would be, I think, a very damaging blow to the whole prestige of the Munster brand and what they're synonymous with in this competition. I don't think it would be good for them at all, and I think it will probably come to pass in the terms of the gate receipts, so they would get out of Challenge Cup matches as well. It would be damaging, I'd suggest.
Yeah. Fiona, you're a hardcore fan, you'd be there either way, but it's a grim thought.
Oh, definitely a grim thought. And even in the last couple of years, Joe, I've noticed myself going up to Thomond Park, the crowds aren't the same going up there. Like, there's still a buzz, and you have the hardcore fans, but I think Gerry's hit the money on the head as well. The Cork, I live in Cork, and it's never a busy road coming back up to Thomond Park when I'm driving up to game day to try and get there myself. So there has been, and they'll have to have a look at that, and no Heineken Cup rugby would be huge for Munster.
And West Cork based players in the squad, like their family and friends and supporters, whatever, that's about a 3.5 hour drive to Thomond Park, isn't it? Like, it's a big ask. And this is worrying, Joe, in a lot of respects, because while it is brilliant for Leinster rugby at the moment that they're the only ones carrying the flag in Europe, and they're top seeds in both competitions and unbeaten in 21 games and bulk suppliers to a brilliant Irish team, in the long run we need a strong Munster. You know what I mean? We just need, it's better for Irish rugby that Munster are strong.
Absolutely. To segue into Leinster Ulster, just to give you the big picture, if the Sharks caught your eye and you enjoyed watching them at the weekend, they play Toulouse on Saturday. That's quite an intriguing game, isn't it? Because actually Graham Rowntree, in advance of the Sharks game, likened the Sharks to Toulouse. So that could be fun, Saturday 3 o'clock. And if Toulouse win and if Leinster beat Leicester at the Aviva, then it will be a Toulouse-Leinster semi-final at the Aviva again.
A repeat of last year. So same quarter-final as last year, potentially the same semi-final, and potentially also the same final, La Rochelle.
Yes, La Rochelle, if you're on Raj Watch, as I know half the country are, La Rochelle plays Saracens on Sunday.
Cracking game.
And I'm stealing shamelessly from your piece, by the way, just to mention all 8 of the round of 16 matches at the weekend went with seedings, form, home advantage. So it means we've a heavyweight quarter-final lineup, 6 former winners each of the last 5 winners. It's like a FA Cup early stages, no shocks. You get the payoff later on. So this tournament might, to the relief of the organisers, might kind of blow up now.
6 former winners with 16 Heineken Champions Cup trophies between them. 5-time winners, 4-time winners, 2-time winners, and 2 South African sides to add something new flavour to it.
Sell out at the Aviva side, it needs it. It's been a very average European season, really. It just hasn't caught the imagination.
I thought they were pretty decent ties, and I'm kind of revising my view on whether it's better to have them 2-legged or 1-legged. I think 1-legged is better. Adds a fair bit of jeopardy. I mean, La Rochelle Gloucester seems to have been a titanic match. Exeter Montpellier I watched was a titanic match. Ospreys really put it up to Saracens. I enjoyed the Leinster Ulster game. I don't know if TV can possibly get across how bad the rain was, but I thought Leinster adapted conditions brilliantly. I thought Ulster were extraordinarily defiant. It's an unrelenting 80 minutes of pressure, and were like a dog with a bone the way they stuck in the game and came back from going 2 scores down twice with fine tries of their own, particularly the first one was arguably the try of the match. And I think there was plenty, there was honour in their exit, put it that way.
Okay. Leinster 30, Ulster 15, Fiona, and that was the scoreline on the hour mark as well, so they saw it the last 20 minutes, double scores. At half time, interestingly, it was Leinster 16, Ulster 8. It was 1 try apiece, but Leinster took their points and had territory and possession advantage. And you kind of felt we're always going to win this game, I suppose. That would be the general sense.
Yeah, they just look like they're in cruise control, don't they? You talk about players missing. You thought Doris missing might kind of interfere with things, but then you had, I know Conan got man of the match, but what a performance Ryan Baird put in. He was unbelievable. They just have someone to walk in and fill the gap all over the park. And I think in the end, I think it was like, I have to say, watching Ulster, I enjoyed their rugby. They were so dogged at times, and I think they had 215 metres all game. They really went at Leinster, and they just they used Lowry well, they used their guys out wide well, but Leinster completely just look in cruise control. When things go against them, they have the confidence to just lift it, and even though they were ahead for the whole game, I felt like we saw it from the draw the week before. You thought they're down and out, but they just have ability to be in cruise control and come out in these matches on top, and they were excellent in how they did it. But I have to say, I loved watching Ulster attack. I thought they were brilliant, and I thought they were excellent at the breakdown as well. They went after Leinster, didn't get a change all the time, but I thought they were unlucky on a few calls to not get a couple of penalties, especially near the end.
I thought James Hume was particularly unlucky to get that yellow card as well, Fiona. A lot of referees would have given that as a legit steal. He just was in a bad mood with Ulster at that point, and James Hume just happened to go for a steal at the wrong moment of the game and got a yellow, but that was a very tough call on him. Rob Herring, 24 tackles, hats off, son. Like, that was a mighty effort. But I think as well, we've got to mention as well Dan Sheehan. His darts are just ridiculous, and what an all-action performance he gives on both sides of the ball. He's just a phenomenal athlete. And James Ryan must be playing the best rugby of his life. This has to be his best season, even better than his breakout 2017-18 season. His line-out work's gone to another level. I mean, that was a vital steal he made. Games like that come down in large measure to how many times you get into the opposition 22 with line-out mauls and how many times you convert them into scores. They only got into the Leinster 22 3 times. One was a malfunction, one was a try, and one was that James Ryan steal. Plus his carrying beyond contact now has gone to another level. His work rate's savage.
Yeah.
When you've got players like Sheehan and Ryan and Conan and Ryan Baird, any one of whom could have been man of the match, it's hardly a surprise, really. It's basically the first choice Irish pack that just won a Grand Slam against not even a second choice.
I mean, that's
Irish
the thing.
pack.
They're even doing the get in a circle and do the breathing thing, just to copper fasten that sense that they're Ireland, basically. And Tyg Furlong is a great man to push someone over a try line.
Yes, he is.
Yes. Porter a big slap in the ass and said afterwards, "You owe me, pal."
How do you possibly stop Andrew Porter 1 metre from the line when he goes that low to the ground with Tyg Furlong acting behind him? You don't. Exactly.
So, I mean, it's a tall order. Jacob Stockdale had a bit of a life about him as well.
Yes, he did, didn't he?
It's funny, I had a moment on commentary where it was just Jacob Stockdale, 26 now, of course, and I thought, God, the boy wonder is, the clock is ticking, and 2018 is increasingly in the distant past. So, I don't know. It's now or never if he's going to recapture something. But he did have a bit of life about him.
I think he was 27 yesterday as well, Joe. I think it was his birthday yesterday. I think he turned 27. Older again.
Yeah. What's your sense of him, Fiona? Because obviously there was a lot there to begin with.
Oh yeah, he was good. He was electric. I thought, he's a guy that's trying to push for this World Cup squad. I was saying to you when we were chatting about Balakoon, he came across very confident. He was eyeing up James Lowe's spot. He said going forward to this World Cup, he thinks he's a bit faster than Lowe in his interview. He said, but before pre-game. But look, I thought he's good. I thought he's a player that you've almost forgotten about, because Ireland have been able. Stockdale, we know what he was like, and he was electric for us, but he almost got the injury. He died down. He couldn't push his way back into Ireland, and therefore I think people don't see him as much, because he's not on that squad. He's not being called into. But I thought his footwork, he was a bit electric. He was feisty. I think he ran about 40 metres to get him involved in a fracas at one stage as well. So he just looked like he's back enjoying the game, and he seemed to have worked a lot. I think on he looks a bit faster than I saw him obviously earlier on in the season, and he's enjoyable to watch as well. He's a guy that you just don't know what he's going to do, and defensively we've definitely seen him improve over the years.
There's very little rugby left now between now and when the 45-man, 50-man World Cup squad is first brought together, and then there's only a few three warm-up games, by which stage you'd imagine the coaches have a fairly good idea of what squad they're going to bring. And now with Leinster having, potentially another 6 knockout games at the Aviva, potentially. They're not there yet, and, anything could happen starting next Friday. But, that's at least 3 more than the others, and probably even more than Munster are going to have, or Ulster. So a rising tide lifts all boats. So you'd have to think that Jordan Larmour, Jimmy O'Brien, Jamie Osborne, Kieran Froy are probably ahead of their counterparts like Stockdale, like Hume and others. So like Hume, I thought it was a brilliant try. Give hats off to like Jacob Stockdale to catch 2 of your own bombs. Yeah. The first one, and Billy Burns' cross kick was just perfect for Hume, albeit Leinster will no doubt think there was a malfunction in their backfield for that to happen. Yes. But at least Ulster now might get into a home quarter final and maybe then a semi-final. But the problem for the Munster players who are candidates to get into the World Cup is what frontline games are they going to get between now and the end of the season?
Andy Farrell's not driving down to watch those games with the same excitement as nipping over to the Aviva to watch Leinster again. So I take your point that Ulster did not wilt and threw a few shots and certainly weren't overwhelmed. But I suppose watching from the comfort of the couch and not appreciating the conditions, I had a slightly slumped sense that there was one inevitable conclusion here. And Dan McFarland afterwards, who's now lost 11 and 14 against Leinster, he kind of summed up my sense of the situation as well. He said, "It is what it is. I can't change the demographics. They've just got way more rugby players, way more earning potential in terms of money as well." And that just kind of captures the general situation. Ulster did fine. Leinster are just different stratosphere at the moment.
Yep, they are. And it kind of like they probably always should have been, given their socio-economic advantages coming from a capital city club. Generating 50,000 sellouts as bonus fixtures on a fairly regular basis. They're a magnificent machine. They're losing Mick Dawson, and they're losing Stuart Lancaster, and they're losing Johnny Sexton. But you would imagine they're in a good position to carry on doing what they're doing because they have become such a machine. The conveyor belt of talent is extraordinary. Yeah. Has there ever been a better Irish front row than Andrew Porter, Dan Sheehan and Tyke Furlong? I can't think of one.
You'd have to name it. I can't think of
some people tried. I mean, but yet they owe it all initially to Munster, the success of the Munster clubs and the success of Munster in the early noughties, and beat them in 06 in the semi-final and getting 2 Heineken Cups themselves. That drove Leinster to be better, and they've since now overtaken everybody and pulled clear. I remember Gary Fitzgerald telling me this 10 years ago. It's almost a miracle that Munster were able to outperform Leinster for a few years, given the inherent socio-economic advantage. It's just a fact of life.
Was because I asked you this off air, but just for the benefit of the listeners, obviously, I couldn't tell when I read the quotes. Was McFarland fuming? Was he emotional? Was he a bit more resigned?
No, it was just very matter of fact.
Okay.
There was very little emotion at all. There wasn't even an angry or a slight hint of anger or frustration. Yeah. No, it was, look, this is what it is.
Okay.
Yeah, I know what you mean, because headlines can distort the flavour of a quote.
Yeah,
potentially. Yeah,
because I saw I can't change the demographics. So if I read it in an angry voice, it reads that way.
It wasn't.
Okay. So Leicester on Friday at the Aviva. Good Friday, Fiona. We had a 51,700 sellout on Saturday. The word is they'll restrict the capacity. They're going to close the upper tiers for Friday. They reckon 27,000 would be a good innings with 5 days to sell this game. So Leicester coming to town again. you'd very comfortably make Leinster extremely hot favourites.
Oh yeah, and I watched that second half of the Leicester game. It's all I caught, and you know, while they were good and they came out with the win in the end, I think if you're Leinster looking at them, they didn't do anything electric, or you wouldn't be worried about them. Obviously, it's a huge game for them, and they're coming over and. You know, they're Leicester play a similar type of rugby all the time. We know, we talked about James Cronin as well and Dane Coles. Like, they have a good, solid set piece. You know, their 9-10 have worked together for a while, so they definitely have the players. But I think even this week's challenge for Leinster against Ulster would have been a far greater kind of physical battle as well. I think Leinster will win it well at home on Friday night.
Yeah. Just a quick word before clock really comes against us, Gerry. Connacht, also out of Europe, they were beaten 41-19 by Benetton. They were 12-0 up after 20 minutes. Yeah. And frustration, I would sum up the mood of the comments from Andy Friend after that game. We had flagged this as almost, Connacht could win a bit of silverware here.
Yeah.
You know, they'll fancy this. They had a bad performance, Gerry, in January, so they didn't have a home tie.
Away to Newcastle, they feel it a weak inside. It's a tough place to go, Newcastle. I've watched the highlights in Premiership Rugby. It's on a Friday night, I think it was too. It's just not it's a tough place to go. It's not a very nice pitch, and but that cost them a home quarter-final and meant they had to go to Treviso. And Benetton's home form this season is excellent. Benetton are a good team. They got about 8 of the Italian Six Nations side, starting Six Nations side. They're very strong, and some good imports as well from Wasps and stuff, and they'll probably fancy their crack at getting a bit of trophy. But still in all, while that's a huge disappointment for Connacht, they've got a game against Cardiff in 2 weeks' time at home that is absolutely enormous. I mean, they're currently 6th in the table. If they win that, they've every chance of making into the Champions Cup next year, as well as the playoffs. When you look what's above them, the other 3 Irish provinces, which are all better resourced and bigger, and you know, a Glasgow side that's effectively Scotland in disguise, and a couple of, I mean, they're actually ahead at the moment of 3 of the South African side, which is remarkable. I mean, the franchise. When you think of what Connacht are up against in that league, that would be a phenomenal achievement.
Yeah, you didn't catch that game, Fiona, with everything, did you?
I did. I watched it back. I thought
you need to eat. You need to go for walks, fresh air.
No, I actually enjoyed watching Benetton. You know, obviously you don't want Connacht to lose, but Jacob Amaga was absolutely outstanding. And himself and Watson absolutely, and Padovani were excellent. You know, they just linked up. His passing out wide was brilliant. Connacht obviously started well, Joe, but they absolutely faded, and we saw the same. You know, defensively, I thought they were quite poor. They were very narrow, and as I said, Amaga had a great game, but he was taking out 3-4 defenders with one pass for some of those tries, so they'll definitely have to go and have a look back at that. But Benetton, I have to say, played some absolutely beautiful rugby. Even a Roots, you had your second row doing a dance out in the sideline, footwork and everything. They've come on leaps and bounds this year.
Okay, Fiona Hayes, Gerry Thornley staying with us. We'll turn to the Women's Six Nations in just a moment. Rugby and Off the Ball is with thanks to Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.
Monday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.
Monday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.
Now you're welcome back. Gerry Thornley of the Irish Times here in studio. Fiona Hayes, Grand Slam winner, is with us on the line. We'll turn to the Six Nations. Ireland were beaten by 50 points at Musgrave Park, 53-3. There's a gap week now, and then Ireland will be in Parma for what will be a really decisive game. You suspect if they could get a result there, it would just improve the mood massively, because at the moment, Fiona, mood is not good.
No, mood isn't good, and you know, they were dominated, I suppose, by a France team, and it's not a France team hurting for a loss. From a loss, that's how good France are. They were hurting from a bad performance in which they still won the game. So look, it's tough for this team. They've had a couple of injuries. They're obviously trying to find a way. They've got very young players, and you're absolutely spot on, Joe. They have to look at this Italian game as a must win. And if they can get over and get that win in 2 weeks, I think it could shift in how people are thinking, and I think those players will gain a bit of confidence at times as well. improved in a couple of areas. Scrum improved, maul defence improved at times, but for international Six Nations rugby, probably not good enough, Joe. And we spoke about those 46 missed tackles. That stat alone is something that would hurt any team, you know?
Because, again, and for people just keeping a very casual eye on it with all the rugby on, it would sound ludicrous to say that the performance against France was better than the one against Wales, but it genuinely was. There were areas which were improved, which you've mentioned, and we should all take great encouragement from 19-year-old Dana O'Brien and her performance at out half, a problem position for Ireland. She started and she was genuinely very, very promising, has lots of tools. And so and there was more aggression, as you mentioned, and the scrum and maul were better. But you list out all the issues with the performance on the other side of the ledger, the missed tackles, the positioning in the backfield, numerous times where, depending on your terminology, but the pillar isn't there. Like basics for this level just weren't happening. There's still so much to fix, Fiona. That's the really worrying, nagging thought at the back of your mind, even for Italy in 2 weeks' time. And I think the team are off for most of the week coming up, and then they'll have a travel day. So I don't know. Is he going with too much inexperience, Greg McWilliams? So, like Andy Farrell has kept picking a 37-year-old because it's right for tomorrow, and it's all very well to build for the future, but I mean, you can also destroy a team.
Yeah, and look, I'll be honest with you, Joe. Like I've thought about this, and I'm trying to think who's available, and obviously a lot has got to do, especially maybe with a couple of the props and stuff that you could have kept on. That's probably out of Greg's hands because maybe they weren't offered contracts and or enough money in contracts, and decided then to pack it in. But the only person that I would be questioning, I suppose, is Cliona Maloney, and I know it's been talked about a lot. She's like, and you can see it clear, I suppose, when there's someone, the sub hooker on the bench starts behind her in Exeter, then you're saying it's not a form thing. But other than that, I think the coaching staff in particular, they're picking with who's available, and you don't know the reason. I suppose he has for not picking Cliona. He hasn't come out and said that, and they haven't. We don't know, is it for? It can't be form on how she's playing. But other than that, I think he's at a kind of, and I hate saying this word because it's international rugby, but at a rebuilding stage. Yeah. And unfortunate as it is, we just haven't played. We haven't looked after the game in Ireland for the last maybe 10 years, and now we're starting to see how clearly we are behind. So the people that are stepping up, be it they're the best players in Ireland, but probably just not at the level that everyone else playing the Six Nations is at the moment. And we hope to build those players to be super competitive as we go on. But we're just exactly seeing the last 10 years product, and we're seeing it here today. And those poor players are the ones that are out there putting everything into the games, but just probably haven't had that coach and are young and inexperienced.
Just not a level playing field, really, is it, for them? Like when you think of how much more powerful Wales were, all their players playing full-time professional rugby in the Premiership, the fact that they went to the World Cup, so they've got a much more settled team. This is a new Irish team. All their rivals went to the World Cup and have pretty much carried on rather than started to rebuild. The discrepancy whenever they played France in recent years in athleticism and speed is quite extraordinary. It's just very difficult to cope with. It's not a level playing field, and they're coming up against an Italian team in Pisa that, in their first game at home, they were within 3 points of France going into the last 10 minutes. You know what I mean? And I know they got obliterated by England, but like everybody gets obliterated by England.
They're a good team, World Cup quarter-final.
Absolutely. Yeah. And every single one of their team has a minimum of 12 caps that started that first game against France. So they're a much more settled side as well. And they're at home, and we know what the Italians are like at home.
Italy are big favourites for that game.
Yeah.
This isn't, Ireland, this is a chance for Ireland to go over and steady the ship. Because this is like Ireland might be able to throw a punch here. Because
Wales weren't big favourites in round one. There was a narrative around this could be a very competitive game, and Ireland, Wales won for last year, and so forth and so on.
They've galloped into the distance now.
Yep.
And then there's Scotland, who have looked better and certainly were beaten by less than Wales than Ireland were, and a lot of their players are in Premier 15 as well. Like we were this grim state of affairs. I can see Fiona puffing at her cheeks there. We were chatting in the Virgin studio yesterday during England-Italy, Fiona, and we were trying to remember when's the last wooden spoon Ireland won, because I keep saying won a wooden spoon. It's not the right terminology. But that's very much on the cards here, a wooden spoon, which is the last thing this group need. But that's about where they are, Fiona.
Yeah, look, I think we came up with 2004, Joe. So it's a long time ago, and these players are coming out fighting, and they're saying, look, we believe in them, in ourselves, and I've talked to a few of them, and they're 100% focused. And I think the positive is that they know that they probably haven't played as best as they can. They just have to get that. So you're talking about Italy. I think I agree. That is a much harder fixture we saw than Scotland. But Joe, you're on the money. Scotland-Wales this weekend, when I watched it back, like, it was so close for most of the game. I thought Scotland have changed their style as well in the last year. I think a lot of the girls, as you said, are playing Premiership rugby, but their backline attack, their 10 in particular, is not afraid to any kind of dinking over. And we talked about Dana O'Brien, and she will get better, and she's really good. But this 10 for Scotland has played in the Premiership. She's got a load of caps for her country, and I suppose, as you said, Scotland are more of a settled ship as well.
So it's
yeah, you probably already spoken about this, Fiona. I've written about this before, and I accept Fiona Coughlin's point that you need cohesion in a team, and therefore you can't be dipping into the sevens players and back in and out. But there's no doubt that players like Stacey Flood would improve the team. And I get it, because there was only sevens last week, so it would be in and out, and that would ruin cohesion and all the rest of it. And I get it that it's Olympic Council money that's driving the sevens investment, and it would be a great achievement for the girls and the men's team to get to the Olympics. But it's only on a streaming service. It's not getting the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of viewers which Six Nations women's rugby gets. No. It's the flagship. The 15-side game is the Six Nations particularly is much more the flagship. I just wonder about the priority, that's all.
Yeah, look, and I agree with you. And look, the sevens girls, I suppose, came in. It's kind of a different way, and especially this group in particular, they came into that programme, a lot of them as, not all of them now, as just sevens players. That's how they were seen. And, that probably wouldn't happen in the men's side of things, because they'll move on, especially the backs in some teams will be pushed up to that sevens if they're not getting game time at other provinces. But it's kind of different. And this group in particular are very focused on making the Olympics, and it would be absolutely immense for them. But I think it's the IRFU that need to kind of look at that. And as you said, there's a far greater audience. I mean, you're talking about Stacey Flood. Eve Higgins is another player who would have made a huge difference, because Enya Breen's injury was massive for the team. She's like, even Vicky Irwin in at 12, she's played 13 over in England for a while, and there was just something really lacking, a bit of punch in the midfield, and that's not her fault. She played really well at times. She just hasn't been used to playing with the girls around her. And the likes of Eve Higgins, and I suppose with these sevens players, Gerry, is that they've been training together, be it sevens, 15s for the last years. They're professional for a long time, so they would probably slot in a little bit more easier because they've been up in camp. They would have dealt with Greg. I think it's the same kind of coach and stuff that's going on there. They're all in together. So I think that, while they're not available, if at times we could get them in there 100%, it's looking at that. But when you talk to the sevens players about, more people are interested in 15s, they definitely don't like hearing that. And I suppose they're focused on their goal of the Olympics.
And like human beings, what they are, Fiona, as a final thought, isn't there and wasn't there just a reality that sevens, in you come, out you go, that was not a good dynamic for team spirit? Like, it just wasn't. No. I mean, and you've certain players been told, oh, we believe in you, you're great, and then sevens players in, you're kicked to the curb, and then back you come in 3 weeks later, and you're trying to mishmash two different teams. Like, that didn't work. You would have experienced that. I don't know if that's the right route.
No, that definitely didn't work, and it's happened down the line for quite a time. I think since maybe 2015 we first saw it, and there definitely is a bit of tension built there. And earlier on, it's different now, but in the early days, these people were contracted, everyone else wasn't. You were heading away, and these people are going back into camp and staying there for the week. So it definitely doesn't mix. And the narrative around it is there isn't very many teams that can do that are able to mix the sevens and 15s in the midst of a competition. I'm not saying that as a player you can't come in and out, but two specialised different games, and it's just about about setting the players up and having the best squad out there. And some of these 7 players obviously would walk into an Irish backline, but morale when they head off, and we saw it last year's in the Six Nations as well, you have someone just coming in then and you're dropped and they're gone again. So it isn't the way forward. And I think that's the huge thing. And whenever I'm out, Joe, not to be going on about it, but if I'm ever out and anyone's ever having a conversation, the first thing they'll ever talk to me about is, where are the Sevens players playing? Because they saw them last year and they were very good in the games. But I think there are a few, and they just need to come up with a system that, you know, makes everyone blend together in a correct way, because morale and team spirit is definitely something that has to be high up in the list and keeping all players happy.
Okay. Well, we'll see how they go against Italy. That could lift our moods massively if they go well. We're pretty much out of time. Rugby and Off the Ball with thanks to Vodafone, proud supporter of the Irish women's rugby team. We all belong to the team of us. Fiona Hayes, thank you very much.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers. And Gerry Thornley of the Irish Times. Thank you, Gerry.
Pleasure.
Monday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.